Spider-Man celebrated his 60th anniversary in 2022, and we got some of the best Spidey figures ever. Let's look at the top 10 Spider-Man figures released this year. I'm gonna start with a hot take alert. I'm leaving the Renew Your Vows Spidey off this list. I know, for so many, this is now their definitive Spider-Man, and I get it. It's a very classic red and blue Spidey, and the big eyes kind of hit that sweet spot after McFarlane, sort of between Mark Bagley and Ryan Stegman, but not really specific to one artist. The articulation is terrific, with pinless joints, and who doesn't love toe articulation? There's just something off. I'm not sure if it's the thick neck or the way too big spider on the chest, or the fact that you had to pay almost $60 to get it as part of a 2-pack. Anyway, life is pretty good when there are 10 figures better than this one from this year. Another just miss was the Mezco 112 Spidey 2099. I hate this too, because I'm a huge Miguel fan, and I can't wait for his appearance in the Spider-Verse sequel. But this is one where the cloth costume looks more like dumpy, thick pajamas than the spandex bodysuits that we're used to. So who actually made it? Let's start across the Pacific with the Japanese version of Spider-Man. While the Toei Company took all kinds of liberties when given the opportunity to produce 41 live-action TV episodes of the Wall Crawler's adventures for the Japanese audience, they kept the original red and blue costume incredibly true to its comic origins. Yes, there's the wrist bracelet that not only holds his suit, but also helps control the Marveler spaceship. And the soles of his boots have a rubbery texture to allow for the outstanding stunts performed. But outside of that, this is classic Spidey. And the Hasbro team, as part of their 60th anniversary line, absolutely nailed all of these details. The head sculpt has bends and folds, just like you would see with an actor wearing a mask. They even made sure the web lines at the neck didn't line up properly, another show-accurate touch. The Spider logos on the front and on the back are stunning and unique from previous versions, and they even got the soles of the shoes correct. But the final touches are the detailed wrist bracelet and the newly sculpted hands, which perfectly mimic the actions of Japan's live-action take on the Wall Crawler. Look, I consider myself a pretty big Spider-Man fan. I mean, I have a complete run of Amazing Spider-Man comics. But despite this, I had never heard of the 8th figure on our list until it was announced. Webman. For many children of the 1970s, their first exposure to Spidey was on The Electric Company, a public broadcasting show for slightly older kids who had graduated from Sesame Street. Spidey's character never spoke on the show. You had to follow the action with his word balloons, which encouraged reading. Marvel seized on this and published Spidey Super Stories, a comic magazine with silly tales geared for younger readers. And with the 25th issue in May of 1977, we had the first and only appearance of Webman. Dr. Doom uses a two-way mirror as his twin machine to create an opposite of Spidey in every way, meaning he is dumb as a rock, with such iconic lines as, "With this punch, you'll really see double." Our hero manages not to succumb to such witty banter, defeats Doom, and wraps up this adventure in a tidy 13 pages. I just can't believe this thing actually exists. The reversed colors really pop, more than I would have imagined. The original retro Spidey bug is put to good use here, and there's a slight change in the spider logo on the chest, with sharper, angrier edges, which doesn't exactly match the comic, but it does set this figure apart from previous versions and lends an air of evil to the figure. As the legendary John Romita Sr. drew the original cover, the head sculpt, a repaint of the Spider UK head, works really well here, as I've always felt like it had strong Romita vibes. So here's to you, Webman. You won't be the last one-off character on this list. Since his introduction, we have gotten numerous versions of Miles Morales as Spider-Man, but none of them have topped the Hot Toys Into the Spider-Verse 12-inch rendition. Hot Toys is a Hong Kong production house founded in 2000, known for producing some of the most exquisitely detailed, high-end collectibles around. And this is the first of 3 figures they have placed on this list. Their version of Miles Morales is incredibly versatile in the amount of ways it can be displayed. I've gone for a combo look, with Miles in his Spidey suit, while still wearing his school uniform and shoes over the top, with his mask half on so that I can show off this terrific facial sculpt. But the possibilities are virtually endless. You can go with street clothes Miles with a spray paint can in hand, or full spider suit Miles with his mask pulled all the way down, or really anything in between. The choice is yours. Hot Toys also has ingenious use of magnets to allow you to switch out different parts, such as this swap of mask for hair. And this figure debuts a new feature. The back of the leg has a spring-loaded action, which allows for increased flexion of the knee joint. From the brilliant execution to the numerous accessories to the attention to even the minutest detail, it's easy to see why this figure landed at the number 8 spot on our list. Sticking with import figures, in 2013, the Medicom Toy Company out of Japan introduced their Mafex line of high-quality 6-inch figures. Spider-Man has been heavily featured in the line, with the very first figure being Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man version. More movie versions would follow in the coming years, but in 2019, we got our first comic version, arguably one of the best Spidey figures ever. For 2022, Mafex unleashed their version of Ben Reilly as Spider-Man. While Ben has taken a beating as the clone of the original Peter Parker, this action figure doesn't take a backseat to anyone. Matching the unparalleled articulation we have come to expect in these high-end import figures, the Ben Reilly version has an even cleaner paint application than the previously released comic Spidey. The blonde head sculpt, visible web shooters, and oversized spider logo help this version of the web spinner stand apart. I admit, I have a huge soft spot for Ben's Spider-Man. Despite the total mess the Clone Saga ended up being for those of us reading comics in the 90s, this figure is pretty solid redemption. The zombie episode of Disney's What If series has already produced several action figures, with even more to come in the next year. Heck, I included the Zombie Hunter Spidey figure on my list of top 10 Marvel Legends for 2021, so you knew when Hot Toys made a super detailed 12-inch version, it was going to make this list, coming in at number 6. Much like the animated design that it's based on, this figure has a bright red and blue color scheme that really pops. And while from a distance, it could pass for a classic comic Spidey, there are little details like the web shooters, the belt canisters, and the unique spider logos on the chest and on the back, which provide just enough unique touches to set this figure apart. Combine that with the cloth cape, which has an underwire support system, and you can see why this is an essential addition to my Spidey collection. Every week at Carbon Scoring, we are bringing you the best in comics, history, and action figures. So subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of the good stuff that we've got coming. 22-year-old comic fan Randy Schuler submitted an idea for a new costume for the Amazing Spider-Man in 1982. Marvel's editor-in-chief Jim Shooter loved the idea and promptly paid Schuler $220 for the complete rights to the idea, which would go on to make billions of dollars for the company. While we've had numerous versions of the black costume over the years, including this very McFarlane-esque figure on the Pizza Spidey body, there really wasn't a great representation of the original comic book look. Until now. The Symbiote Spidey released on the Retro card back this year utilizes that retro Spidey buck, but with a new head sculpt reminiscent of the earliest Mike Zeck and Ron Frenz versions of the character. The costume was initially only meant to last 6 issues, but due to its popularity, the suit gained a life of its own. Literally, as it was discovered to be an alien symbiote trying to permanently bond to the wall crawler. Frenz was the regular artist on Amazing Spider-Man during this run, and his version of the black suit became the standard. This figure captures the muscular yet agile aesthetic of Ron Frenz's art, with incredible articulation, as well as 3 different sets of hands, including fist, wall crawlers, and thwippy hands. The retro cardback series has been great, so that old collectors like me can get slightly different versions of their favorite characters while allowing new collectors an opportunity to add fan favorites to their shelves. Video games have come a long way from when I was a kid. And yes, this is an actual commercial for the Spider-Man video game for the Atari 2600 console back in 1982. Now, we have games like this, the Spider-Man game for the PS5. Not only does this game feature the ability to unlock numerous costumes for the web spinner, our good friends at Hot Toys have been making them in 12-inch scale for the past several years. We've gotten incredible versions of the 2099 suit, as well as the Mark IV spider armor in this line, and they look fantastic sitting on my shelf. But the one we're all waiting for came out this year, the classic suit, and it shows up at number 4 on our list. I spend a ton of time raving over figures that are representative versions of a specific artist's take on a character. I've already done it in this video, and I'm going to do it again before the countdown's over. But what I think is so remarkable about this figure is that it's a perfect amalgam of the modern take on Spider-Man. The colors are classic red and blue. The spider logos are simple and elegant, not too big, not too flashy, but also not representative of a singular style. The suit has texture, but without overdoing it. It's the eyes, however, that cement the modern look. They're certainly bigger than the 60s styles of Ditko and Romita, but not as overblown as the 90s looks of McFarlane, Larson, and Bagley. Plus, the asymmetrical black outline is firmly modern, from the age of computer-enhanced inking and coloring. I think we're all hoping that when we next see Tom Holland in the tights, it looks a lot like this. Any other year, and this figure would have certainly held the top spot. But for 2022, this masterpiece is only the third best Spidey figure. The world of comics were forever changed in the summer of 1962 when a failing title put a teenage superhero on the cover of its final issue. That character would go on to become a pop culture phenomenon, but it all started right here. The look of the Wallcrawler's costume would change subtly over the years, but this figure pays homage to the brilliant art and design of his co-creator Steve Ditko. Ditko took all the typical superhero conventions and twisted them around with his Spider-Man design. Gone was the bulging, larger-than-life body in favor of a trim, small teenager. Instead of heroic spotlight poses, Ditko's Spider-Man emerged from the shadows. And whereas Superman, Batman, and Captain America had at least one part of their faces exposed, Spidey wore a full face mask. The end result was that readers could see themselves in the character. I gotta give the Hasbro team credit. They really tried to get the classic Ditko web wings to work. And in static poses, they pretty much do. But with a figure this articulated, it's almost impossible. I really appreciate the fact that the eyes on this head sculpt don't perfectly mimic the eyes on the cover of Amazing Fantasy 15. That cover was penciled by Jack Kirby and inked by Ditko. This figure much more matches the eyes that Ditko drew for the majority of his run. If I had one complaint keeping this figure from being higher on the list, it would be the spider on the back. Yes, it is the exact shape and design from that first issue, but whether it was intentional or simply a coloring error, it was blue in that first appearance. Never fear. The 3 3/4-inch retro Spidey fixed it by giving us the properly colored version. Coming in at number 2 are the Parker Brothers. No, not the board game company that ruined every trip ever to your grandma's. These Parker Brothers. Peter B. and just Peter, I guess, from Sentinels into the Spider-Verse line. Sentinel Toys is a relative newcomer in the action figure game, and I became aware of them from their GameStop exclusive Miles Morales figure. The quality of this toy blew me away, so as soon as pre-orders were available for Peter, I jumped on it. Pretty glad I did, based on these aftermarket prices. I did an entire video on this figure where I made the argument that it was the best Spider-Man ever made, and I stand by that. You really have to have it in hand, though, to appreciate its greatness. It's the total package. Sculpt. It's a spot-on representation of the Spider-Verse Spidey, with the spindly yet muscular proportions, the carved-in web lines, and the pixelated texture of the suit. Paint. clean as a whistle, with subtle changes from a matte paint on the red and blue to a glossy white on the eyepieces, giving a dynamic reflection to the head sculpt. And of course, articulation. That's where this figure really shines. It's not that it has more joints or necessarily different joints from a Marvel Legend or even a high-end import. It's the way they feel and function. These shoulders create spectacular range of motion while looking perfect from every angle. The elbows and knees are so smooth, almost buttery in their movements. Easy to manipulate, but tight enough to stay in place. There's even a subtle cut in the hamstrings that allows for a 180-degree bend at the knees. And did I mention accessories? 13 hands, including one with a coffee mug. 5 different head sculpts. 2 belly sections, one fit and one used to be fit. It's easy to see why this was the best Spider-Man action figure of 2022. Wait, there's one better? You better believe there is. The bombastic Bagman. Wait, hear me out. While you may see a store exclusive that simply reused the Reed Richards FF body and stuck a couple of new parts on it, I see a pivotal moment in the history of the Amazing Spider-Man. Issue 258 from the summer of 1984 was a massive turning point in the life of the wall crawler. It was the culmination of the saga of the alien costume, and for all intents and purposes, the true origin of Venom. We learn that the suit was actually alive. It tried to bond to Spidey, but was removed and finally captured. Eventually, it broke free to seek its revenge. But that's another story. This is the tale of what happens next. Pete is left without a stitch of clothing, so his pal, Johnny, hooks him up with an old FF suit, complete with a paper bag for a mask and a kick me sign on the back. It is one of the most perfect examples of the old Parker look. Getting to interview the artist of this issue, the legendary Ron Frenz, has been my favorite thing since starting this channel. And for that, the Bagman takes the top... Oh, hang on, I think the mail just came. Well, let's see what we got. Oh, you've got to be kidding me! Now I've got to start this list all over again! If you want to see my top 10 Marvel Legends for the year, check out this video. And if you're looking for the best in comics history and action figures, subscribe to Carbon Scoring.